Good morning, and welcome to the First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, FPC, to our members and friends, a spiritual and welcoming community. My name is the Reverend Dr. Cynthia Landrum, or Cindy, as many call me, and I serve as this church's minister. If this is your first time with us, we welcome you. I'd like to introduce a few of our staff and invite them to wave if they're present. And first, our music director is Brad Dumont. And our welcoming and membership coordinator is Jolene Trotta. She may be online, I'm not sure today. And our director of religious education is Michelle Coté. She had to leave early today for family reasons. The rest of our staff are listed in your order of service, and you can reach out to any of them for more information about this church and its programs by email, or if they are on the chat, in the chat, if you're online. We invite you also to check out our webpage for news and information, and you can also sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. For your safety and that of those around you, we ask that you keep your masks on and properly over your nose unless you're up here at the pulpit and you're alone up here. Please observe 3 feet of social distancing. Check with other people you're talking to about what distance they're comfortable at. And please observe signage around our building that lets you know more information, including how to turn on the air filters when you're in any room with other people. After our service, it's our custom to have coffee hour. Our COVID protocols are still not quite allowing coffee yet inside, but you're welcome to group and congregate down in Fellowship Hall after the service for conversation. Please join us there to meet people and learn more about FPC. For your major announcements, I refer you to those in your order of service. Specifically, please note we're doing this special reading of All My Sons on the 25th, that's Friday at 7 p.m. for Zoom. And it looks like you need to let them know by email if you want that Zoom link. So please join us for that. And now I would like to begin with our land acknowledgement. I'm going to reverse the order a little bit here, do our land acknowledgement, and then invite you to greet your neighbor so that to facilitate the choir's transition up here into the pulpit. So as we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this service is being held by a community that gathers on the stolen traditional lands of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people. We pay respect to elders who lost their lives in the colonization of this land and recognize that these indigenous tribes are still today facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon, the waters, the life-giving plants, and all of Earth's creatures, as well as the wind, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize that this is just a first step in moving towards right relationship with Native peoples and healing of the earth. And now, please take a moment and greet your neighbor.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round and we are. We shall be known by the ones so angry, the seeds of change on our running within here. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into nowhere. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great journey. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Our opening words are by the Reverend Gretchen Haley. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes and forwarded emails, as if the new zodiac capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it all already figured out, and also the burden of believing we can either have all the control or none. Here, in our song and our silence, in our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already here and now. Come, let us worship together. Our first hymn may be a little bit new and unfamiliar to you, but it's easy to learn. Please stand and join in singing if you wish, in body or in spirit. Please stand in body or spirit. Definitely join in singing in body or in spirit. got a little teary listening to you all sing. Wasn't expecting that. They sang in first service. It didn't make me cry as much. Please join in our covenant and affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. No more let roam o'er the skies, and words of love and peace arise. Let joyful songs of praise be sung through every land, by every tongue. As I said, Michelle had to leave early today, but she left this beautiful story, which is titled Share Your Rainbow. 18 artists draw their hope for the future. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my hope for the future today, which is why Michelle chose this beautiful book. But she just highlighted a few pages of artists sharing their hope for the future. I'm going to hold it up. I don't know how much you can zoom in, but this page says, I can't wait to ride the rainbow. My rainbow is playing ball with everyone. Mine is the sweet treat of a happy birthday. And to hit up the roller rink with my friends to skate the night away. Oh, I remember roller rinks. In my rainbow, we will hold hands as we walk and talk and listen and be together. And then the book concludes with asking, what's your rainbow? And invites people to share on social media by tagging @randomhousekids and use hashtag #ShareMyRainbow. That's the story. If there are any youth in here with us today, this is the moment in which you may depart for the high school discussion group. And we're going to turn to sharing our joys and sorrows here in beloved. Our words for prayer and meditation this morning come from the Reverend Douglas Taylor. Eternal Spirit, from whom all things come and to whom all things return. We gather this hour as a community of faith, seeking to transform our world through prayer and action, seeking to transform our lives through justice and beauty and righteousness. We pause together to reflect. We reflect upon our times, our culture, and ourselves. We reflect upon the needs of all people and upon our own needs and those of the people we love. O Spirit, hear our cry. Help us to find hope against the embittering despair, to find strength to act in the face of continued injustice and apathy, to find courage to still believe in those ideals of justice and beauty and righteousness. Help us to reach out from our very being to transform the world and to be transformed ourselves. Help us to know, despite the messy complexity of life, that we do not labor in vain, that peace will one day prevail, that perseverance will be rewarded, that hope is a powerful response in the face of such difficulty. Be thou an ever-present strength on the journey, O Spirit, This we pray in the name of all that is holy. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Our next hymn is number 1004 in your teal hymnals, Busca el Amor. Brad, tell us how we're going to sing this today. Seated. A reading by Wendell Berry titled A Vision. If we will have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing it, enriching it. If we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or of heaven, then a long time after we are dead, the lives our lives prepare will live there, their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens rich in the windows. The river will run clear as we will never know it, and over it, birds' song like a canopy. On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells in noon shade. On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest, an old forest will stand. Its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots. The vein of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields. In their voices, they will hear a music risen out of the ground. They will take nothing from the ground they will not return, whatever the grief at the parting. Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a grove, and memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into sacrament. The abundance of this place, the songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and indwelling light. This is no paradisal dream. Its hardship is its possibility. Thus ends the reading. Today, our plate is shared between the good work of this congregation that has endured through so much and brings hope to so many, and the food project, more about which can be found in your order of service. They do wonderful work on food justice. And for their mission to succeed and for ours, we will now gratefully receive the morning offering. I have been waiting for this day. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited today to hear your voices. It's so wonderful. Thank you for that. My sermon this morning was going to be talking about more like personal faith. How do we come through hard times and renew our sense of faith when we've been in despair? But I wanted to talk about it instead more globally, more corporately. Like, how do we as a congregation, how do we as a faith restore our faith after having come through hard times? And when I was called to be minister of this church, people were asking me in that process, some of you might have asked me the question, like, what's your mission for FPC? And I said, I think hopefully wisely at the time, that was something I was going to be learning from you, that I didn't come in with an agenda, but that I wanted us to grow together in terms of my understanding what the mission of this church was and to be harmonious in carrying that forward. Now, after all we've been through together, 3.5 years later, and after 2 years of pandemic, I think I have a better vision of what your vision is and where you're calling us forward. And, you know, during this time, like, it's, I think, very audacious that during a pandemic, when we're dealing with things like never before, this congregation decided to form a strategic task force and create a strategic plan in the midst of all that would lead us forward. And you're going to be hearing more about that over the next couple of months as the board really rolls out that strategic plan. Some of you have been hearing it on the program council and in your committees. And many of you were asked by that task force, what was your vision for FPC? And it was indeed crafted together by your responses. But I want to talk about 4 aspects of how my faith for where we're going has been renewed and restored during this time of pandemic, and especially as we're coming out of pandemic. So the first is in worship. And I have to say, like, I used to be a big believer in joys and sorrows and enjoyed it. And then I went to seminary. And in seminary, you're really taught that joys and sorrows is a bad thing. You're taught that it's a bad thing because it limits the size of a congregation, because you can't have 1,000 people sharing joys and sorrows, right? And it limits it in that it's unfriendly to new people, especially when we're not saying our names and letting people know who we are, that people can feel like they don't belong. It's isolating to introverts who might not feel comfortable. It can get very political, and it can be, sometimes the microphone can be controlled by a few long-winded individuals. And indeed, all those things can be true about joys and sorrows, particularly when things go badly. But when it goes well, it's phenomenal, isn't it? And one of the things I realized during Joys and Sorrows was that during the pandemic, was that I had been looking at joys and sorrows all wrong. That it wasn't something to be phased out. It was something to be uplifted. It was something to be embraced. It was something central to what we were doing. Because indeed, my entire philosophy of worship had been that, like, it's kind of an archaic form, this like preaching for 20 minutes from a microphone, a sermon that is heard once by one body of people in one location and is never heard again. This is a form that goes back thousands of years, but particularly back to the time before we had recording devices and screens, and before we could just dial up on our phones a good speech on any subject we want to hear. And what I discovered during the pandemic was that worship really is the heart of the church. Like, I knew that academically, but I hadn't lived that experience yet. I hadn't lived how worship holds the people together. That in a time when we were so separate from one another, in a time when we couldn't see when we were scared to go out and see our friends, even, sitting outside, we didn't know yet what the parameters of this virus was, when we were washing all our groceries and we weren't going to the stores, that we could come together virtually in worship together. And not only could we be together in this space, that we could create this vessel that could hold us in community, but that in this vessel, we could share individually what was going on in our lives. And through that, we were deeper connected. Wow. Suddenly I understood, like, this is what church really is about. This is why we do this. We do this all the time. We've been doing it for centuries, but we do this so that we will have it through such times as these. And through such times as these in all of our lives, we all go through the dark nights of the soul. And maybe week to week, we don't understand, like, why do I really want to get up to church? But then church is there when you need it, because you've been going. And that's the beauty of it. And I became a true believer in church and a true believer in joys and sorrows, that it should be not just continued, but that it really became a central ritual to me during the times when we were most isolated and online. Brad and Michelle and I went to a workshop on hybrid ministry, on multi-platform ministry this week, led by one of the ministers who's become something of an expert in this area over the last couple of years, which is the Reverend Kimberly Debus. And the first half an hour of that workshop was other congregations trying to figure out how to get to where we got to today, where we can be having joys and sorrows off-site and on-site and move seamlessly between them, where we could have been hearing one off-site, one on-site, one off-site, one on-site smoothly. And we can clap here in the room for a joy heard off-site, and they hear us off there. They can clap there. Clap, folks. You have to unmute. Clap, and we can hear you. Clap, and they can hear you. We can truly share like we have not been sharing before in community together through disparate locations. And that's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. One of the other things that has been central and shifting during this time for me is the role of community. Now, when I thought that worship was losing its place as the central life of the church, I was okay with that, because there's so many other things in community that this congregation does. And I say to people all the time, like, it's okay if worship isn't your thing and you connect to FPC in other ways. And absolutely it is. And we have a wealth of opportunities, from our small group ministries to our spiritual conversations group and our meditation group, to our justice groups in the Peace Vigil, to a racial justice group that holds a drop-in conversation every week. And so many of these we were able to keep going during the pandemic. I mean, even Saturday morning breakfasts went online, and I guess everybody just eats their own breakfast. But it's still a program where people are connecting with the subject together. And we started new programs. Our Tuesdays in the Park with George. Tuesdays in the Park at the gazebo was something that started up in this pandemic as an opportunity to bring this congregation together. And one of the things I saw is that when times are hardest, when we're most isolated, we will find ways to connect. My vision for FPC is that we continue to expand these ways, to grow in the ways we're connecting inside our walls and to each other, and also in ways that we're connecting to our surrounding community more. And a great example of that is some of the work our arts program has been thinking about. And we've got a reading coming up this week and a sermon coming up in 2 or 3 weeks about the arts programming here. And you're going to be invited to share your art in the social hour during that Sunday. So that's another way in which, during the hardest times, my faith was renewed by FPC. Now, this week I met with my coach. I've been meeting with a coach in the last few months, and he asked me, if I was to ask a couple random members of your congregation, would they be able to tell me what your mission is? Would they be able to tell me what your mission for this congregation is? And I said, well, I think they could tell you 2 things. One is they could tell you how I've been leading them into hybrid worship and online ministry during the last couple of years here. And the other thing I think they could tell you is that I'm a social justice preacher, and I preach about social justice issues regularly, and that a big part of my mission has to do with social justice for this congregation. And I think our Social Justice Council in recent years has been doing a good job of seeing itself more as interrelated and not just as like, okay, this is the group working over here for this issue, and this is the group working over here for this issue, but how can we both engage all the groups in all the issues, and how can we engage the whole congregation in these issues so that the social justice task forces aren't the only ones working on climate change or supporting asylum seekers or racial justice or LGBTQ issues, et cetera. But one of the things that happened during the pandemic is, I thought it was going to be much harder for us to do justice work. So much justice work is physical. It's showing up at a rally. It's getting together and marching in the streets, right? But this congregation took it upon themselves to keep justice going. Our Peace Vigil throughout the whole pandemic continued to meet as they have been doing for decades, over a decade, or 15 years, since the Iraq War, really, I think is when it started, right? Our Peace Vigil has been meeting every Thursday night. And when we see the inevitable march of war across this globe, they don't stop and say, we give up, it's still war. No, they get out there once again, every week, with their signs and their candles and saying, honk if you want peace. When we hit the Trump years in this congregation, and suddenly the tide was turning in our country about policies about immigration and asylum seekers, we didn't say in this congregation, we give up, like immigration justice, there's no more of that. No. That's when this congregation formed their Supporting Asylum Seekers Task Force, which has been going one family at a time to support asylum seekers in this state in their path towards citizenship. Whenever the path seems long and hard and the way forward is unclear, I always remind myself of the fact that the first suffragists, most of them never got to vote. Abolitionists fought for generations to end slavery. Hundreds of years we had slavery, and hundreds of years people were against it here too. It's easy for us to look at someone like Thomas Jefferson and say, he was a product of his time. Everyone believed in it, but not everyone did. People were fighting against slavery from the beginning. And they fought for generations and they didn't see it, but their descendants did. And eventually we ended slavery in this country as we knew it. And I think about this in particular in regards to climate change, because Lord knows it can be overwhelming, the work we have to do to turn this planet around and end the destruction we've been doing to it. But Sharon and Rick, are you giving up therefore? No, they're leading the way. We're putting together, our climate change task force is saying, we're gonna work on things right here at FPC, right, Lee? We're gonna change all of our light bulbs in the entire building during the pandemic. While we're out of the building, it's a good chance, let's turn over all the light bulbs in the building. We're gonna do every little piece that we can here locally, and we're gonna keep fighting nationally and internationally to end the destruction to our planet. When the path forward is hard and long, my faith tells me, and the work of these people here, you people here, tell me that we are going to bend the arc towards justice. And I tell you, one of the things that was hardest on me during the pandemic, other than the fact that I feel like I didn't see children for over a year, was that we couldn't sing here in worship. And at the beginning, I said to myself, there is no point coming back into worship unless we're singing in worship. There's just no point. We might as well just stay online if we're not going to sing together. I was wrong about that. There was a point that brought us together all year long. There was a point for us to gather, and it was important that we did, that we worked on getting filters and we brought ourselves in and under whatever parameters we could, and we were together, and that was important. And we were together with folks online as well, and that's important, that we kept this path of inclusivity. But it was hard. But this congregation was so innovative. You created driveway choirs, or you learned about them and implemented driveway choirs. You did Zoom choirs. You did everything possible in every different way that was possible to sing under whatever parameters you were given, and you kept going. And I applaud you in the choir for that. And I'm so glad that throughout this time that we have come to this moment when we can sing together and worship again. And it reminds me that arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The path to get here to today was long, but there is singing. And we may encounter dark times again. We may have another period where we can't sing again, but we know somewhere in our future, there will be voices raised together. In all of these ways, voices raised in song, voices raised for justice, voices raised for building community with one another. May it be so. Our closing hymn is one you know well, so I'm hoping to hear you sing it out loud and strong. It's number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Our closing words are by the Reverend Scott Taylor. Go with faith, not the kind, let me start again. Go with faith, not the kind that is called to move mountains, but the quieter sort that calls us to take the first step, even when the whole staircase sits beyond our view. And as we strive towards the unseen, may we notice that the way unfolds only as we risk walking it. And may we remember and trust that none of these steps are ones we take alone. Amen. Peace be with you till we meet again. As life lays its task before you, keep love's banner floating o'er you. Peace be with you till we meet again. So we promised you today that instead of a postlude, we're going to have a hymn sing. And we're going to have people call out numbers. But you know what I thought, Brad, is we could start with like letting the folks online call out a few numbers, or not numbers, but names of your favorite hymns. What do you say? Offsite folks, unmute. Tell us what are your favorite hymns. Shout it out. I'm not hearing anything yet. There we go.
Blue Boat Home.
Blue Boat Home. All right, any other votes for Blue Boat Home?
Spirit of Life.
Spirit of Life, okay. What else? All right, you guys good if we start with those two? Blue Boat Home and Spirit of Life? Those are some fun ones. Rose in the Wintertime. I love Rose in the Wintertime, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's start with 123, Spirit of Life, and then we'll go to the vote home after that. 123, Spirit of Life. Feel free to stand if you like. Spirit of we will home 10-6-4. Heal them all 10-6-4. And we'll just do one verse.
Great hymnal. I've been sailing all my Come sing a song with me. 346.
346. 346. How many people know this one? Come say something. Not all of you know, but I'm new to you person, so every song is new to me.
Especially when you tell you the title by the chorus instead of by the first line.
Yes. Thank you.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me.
congregation up there, and they love to sing Finlandia. But ever since the struggle in Ukraine has started, I've been thinking about song number 159. This is my song.
159. 159.
The tune is Finlandia.
Any numbers can go.
It's a little light.
Oh, yeah.
What number do we got?
118, I believe. I mean, they're only two that I know.
That's it, 118.
Really three of them want to do that.
Let's do all the verses on this.
What the heck?
And feel free to stand, move,
Clap. Clap.
One more, we have one more enough. 1053, 1053.
Oh. No, I think I can't hold the rest of the night. So I might not hear the light.
Big round of applause to Sanghee. Thank you.